Thank you for coming tonight. I'm Connie Boyer, and tonight I have with me our city administrator, Aaron Quaker, and our special guest here is Steve Wemmie, and he is our Jefferson County assessor. I'm actually really excited tonight because I think we're going to learn a lot from Steve. And this is being recorded, so you'll be able to see it later and tell your friends about it because I think we're going to get some really good information. So Steve, why don't you just start off with how long you've been assessor, how did you get to that position? And then we're going to get into the meat of what being an assessor means and, how we assess our taxes and everything that happens over in your office.
In 2012, Sherry Blau hired me as an appraiser for the office. And when she retired, I became the assessor. Through the whole process of going to classes and passing tests and getting on the list to be eligible.
What's it take to become an assessor?
To be an assessor, you have to be on what they call the list. You have to pass the assessor's test. And now you have to have a certain amount of education just to be able to even take the test. That's changed in the last few years. And then to maintain the assessor every term, we have to maintain 150 hours of education, of 90 of which have to be tested.
And that's your term
every 6 years.
Every 6 years. Okay.
So it's a process. It's an ongoing process.
Sounds a little intense too.
It can be.
Yeah. But you're hanging in there.
We've made it so far. 6 years in January 1 will be
Great.
My first term.
Awesome. Well, let's first of all, I want to mention that Steve had given me this flyer called the Assessor's Duties and What They Mean to You. And we'll go through a lot of this stuff tonight, but this is a really good flyer that I'm assuming they can pick up at the counter at your office. And so let's just start going through this. And I have some other questions that we'll weave in and out of here. But the first question has to do, what are the assessor's duties?
So the assessor by law is to find, list, and value property. That's really the essential part of it. I mean, and to assess it means you have to put it in an appropriate class. You have to measure any structures and paving, anything that's infrastructure, and then value it according to the Iowa Property Real Assessment Value book. They have a manual that they print, which we will be turning to a new one this next year.
Okay.
Which would be my first time doing that, and it's evidently a process in itself.
Does that come down from the state level?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they hire a company to find values of what construction costs, and then they make it all into this manual, and then that's how we price everything.
Okay, great. Now, one thing I noticed here, it says the assessor is concerned with value, not taxes. So that's an important point.
That's exactly right. The assessor values property, and once it's valued, it's out of our hands, and it goes to the auditor. The auditor applies the taxes based on everyone's budgets, and then the treasurer collects the money.
Okay. There's several terms here: market value, assessed value, taxable value. Can you go through each one of those and talk about the difference?
So a market value is what your house or property should bring on the market on a mass market approach. We don't value properties as individuals. We value on a mass market approach, simply because, like in Jefferson County, there's almost 19,000 parcels, and you just can't physically hit every one every year. It takes us about 10 years, roughly 10 years, to cycle through everything.
Interesting. I didn't realize that.
So unless somebody makes a change to their property that we catch, or they report it, which is required by law, but not everyone does. And so we're always out there looking. And
so let's talk about that. I know recently there was an ad in the paper.
Yes.
That says you have to report. That
Yes.
comes out once a year. You do it twice a year. How often do you do that? And tell us what that process is.
So that process is basically the Code of Iowa says that people are to report any changes to their property, so that it can be assessed.
And what does that mean from the inside to the outside?
So what that means is any remodeling, I get a lot of calls from people that just maybe put in a furnace, which is fine. I just noted on the property, we don't actually change anything for a furnace or a roof typically, or if you painted your house, that's not a typical change. That's more of a maintenance in our eyes.
If you rehab a bathroom, does that need to be reported?
If you rehab a bathroom or a kitchen, new siding, windows, that stuff will definitely change the value of a house.
Okay.
Any major remodeling inside, drywall, finished basements will change the value.
You brought up an interesting point, though, one that I recently heard, and that has to do with painting your house.
Correct.
And whether that changes your value again, because there is a perception out there that if you paint your house, that your taxes are going to go up. So will you please dispel that myth?
So, not necessarily always, but typically painting or new roof will not change your value. The problem, I think, is some places get pretty run down. If there's a hole in the roof, things like that will change the condition of your house. If it's just fixing, what's there, it doesn't really change the condition. But there's holes in your roof, and then you suddenly put on a new roof, you're going to maybe change that house from, say, below normal to normal condition. And the same with siding. If it hasn't been painted in 30 or 40 years and clapboards are falling off, and all of a sudden you come back and put on new clapboards to replace broken ones, it's not necessarily the painting that raises it, it's that maintenance, that fixing it, bringing it back up to a normal condition.
So are there different classifications
of conditions?
Yeah, can you explain that?
So there's a very poor, a poor, below normal, normal, above normal, very good, and excellent. And then they're going to add 2 more in this new manual on each side of normal to just kind of make it so it's not such a big jump.
Interesting. I did not know that. So see, I knew we were going to learn things tonight.
Right. So I guess the big point that I guess I took from what you just said is general maintenance won't change the
That's correct.
standard of your house.
That-
However, if you let your house go to a poor rating and then you then go, okay, I'm going to fix it up, well, then that's going to change because you've now changed your rating.
Absolutely.
So it's a matter of if you maintain your house, it's never going to be a problem.
Correct.
If you let it go into a different standard, then
Yes.
upgrading your house is going to change.
Absolutely.
Yes,
But just paint in itself will not
Right.
change.
Maintaining your house is not going to change your
Correct.
standard.
Correct.
Or your tax level.
Yes.
So let's go back to market value, assessed value, taxable value. You talked about market value,
Okay.
assessed value, taxable value.
So assessed value comes from that mass market approach that comes off, and that is changed by the median sale, the middle sale, not the average, but the middle sale of the. And I run a study just today, and in 2021 to this point, there's been 281 what we call usable residential sales in Jefferson County. I am to be within 5% of 100%, anywhere from 95 to 105 to be tolerable by the state. So when I ran it this morning, it was 86.23. So just, oh boy, just what 14% roughly. I'm low by 14%. Now, earlier in the year when sales were really hot, we were as much as 27% behind.
Are you talking about your assessed valuation
Assessed
was
value was behind the sales.
behind the sales?
And that's on that median sale, that middle sale.
So does that mean you have to, those are the ones you need to go back in and review for assessed valuation?
What that means is, and typically I don't review every sale, but we try to review anything that we have quite a discrepancy on to see why, see if there's a reason why. Because consistency is a very big thing for us.
Sure.
But what that means is if the ball were to drop, and it won't change for 2022 because that's a non-assessment year. So the sales of 2023 will be what changes, or what happens in 2022 will be the change that happens in 2023. So this could go higher, could go lower. It could be, in another year, we might be pretty close. We don't know.
So,
But if the ball were to drop now,
Uh-huh.
typically to be at 100%, I would need to raise 14%
okay.
across the board.
Mhm.
Now, it doesn't change across the board because not all areas, we have map areas, not all map areas are the same rate of change. Now, you could change it 14 across the board, the state would be fine with it, but you would lose your equitability. We have a couple small towns that have had fantastic sales this last year that would be quite more than that 14%, maybe twice that easily.
Okay.
But those sales don't hurt this year because we're coming up against a non-assessment year. So we'll just have to see what happens this next year to see what changes.
Okay. And now talk about taxable valuation.
Okay, taxable valuation is what is assessed, and then what is the taxable valuation comes after a rollback. And then
And let's
that's
talk
what,
about exactly what that rollback is.
so the rollback is given to the auditor. I can't tell you what the exact percentage is for residential, but it's somewhere around like 58% roughly.
Yep.
That you pay on. So you would pay on, if you had $100,000 house, you would pay on 58,000 roughly, and not the full 100,000.
And go ahead.
Well, and that also goes into all of apartment complexes are now starting to be rolled back into that residential standard rather than commercial. So that actually lowers the amount of taxable value for the city, along with commercial properties are now rolled back 10% down to
Yes.
90% of the
Yes.
assessed value.
Yes.
So the state has reduced the amount of property taxes that a city or a county can levy against a
Correct.
property.
Multi-residential properties this last year, the legislators have totally done away with that class. It'll always be residential now. And they was on a step program to bring the multi-residential rollback in line with the residential rollback. And in 2022, that's supposed to be complete. And as of this last year, then they've just done a clear away with the multi-residential class.
So that seems like it would be pretty significant for taxing bodies.
Absolutely, absolutely. So a multi-residential property is a property or a house, whether it's a converted house into apartments or a full-fledged apartment house, three or more units makes it a multi-residential property. Fortunately or unfortunately, multi-residential properties this last year took a huge jump because they've been selling well, and we've had a lot of sales.
Interesting. Yeah. And then you have ag land. Do we have very much ag land within our city limits?
Not a lot of ag land, and ag land's valued by the state on a productive value based
Yeah.
on the CSR2, the corn suitability rating.
Yeah, so it's totally different.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, and that comes directly. The state gives us all that information. We have no.
Yeah, and again, the rollback all really has to do with the state legislature and the state and how they're doing that.
Yes, the Department of Revenue, and I don't know if the Department of Management. I think it's strictly the Department of Revenue comes up with that,
Yeah.
and that's a state. That rollback is across the state. That is everyone within the state. Yes.
Yeah. So I want to digress just a little bit because we talked about this a little bit, but not completely. How does the assessor estimate market value? Apparently there's three different approaches: the market approach, cost approach, and the income approach.
So the market approach is what a fee appraiser would use. And we do use the market approach, but we tie that into the mass market approach to come with, and that's with that median sale. It is by far, the market approach is by far the best approach. The cost approach is strictly based on cost of materials, which is the easiest way to come up with a mass market approach. The income approach is a way of coming up with value, and banks use that a lot. People getting loans on like a business or something, they would use that a lot. But it's really, quite honestly, the least the least, I want to say the
Least used.
least
Yeah.
used or not least desirable way to come up with a
Okay.
income.
Okay.
But it is an option.
Okay. And then, so when somebody's unhappy with their assessed valuation, can you take us through the process of
Okay.
how they go about appealing your assessment?
So if you're unhappy with your value, the best thing you can do is call my office.
Okay.
We can look at it. We're always happy to look at a property and at least look at it and see if we're, because if something's not listed right, it's just not listed right, and we're happy to make it right. If we still don't come to an agreement on it, there's an informal agreement we can do in the month of April. But then in May, it goes to the board of review. You have to file with the board of review, and then they meet during the month of May. And you meet with a 3-member board, a realtor, a farmer, and a contractor by law. And they look at any appeals and make a decision on them.
All right. Okay. So that's in April and May.
Correct. And if there is, for an appeal, the board does require that we do an interior a whole inspection of the property. So we'll go look at a property, and quite honestly, not all the time, but sometimes we find things that there again just aren't listed right, and we try to do the right thing and make it right. It's just
How often or how many of those do you get a year in the springtime?
we've probably had as few as 20 maybe, and we've had years that there was maybe 150.
Now, I know sometimes there's certainly, or at least that's what I've heard, when people have issues with the Stopacevate homes versus just conventional construction. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think people do have questions on that.
So Stopacevate homes, there was a time when Stopacevate homes really carried a significantly higher value than stick-built homes. Sales supported that. It was shown. But in today's market, I'm not sure what has changed, but I think the inventory of Stopacevate has become enough inventory there that they're really kind of coming together. It's there's some quality differences sometimes, but not always. It just kind of depends. But I think the inventory level has come up on Stopacevate enough that it's just not as out of line anymore as the old stick-built houses. I mean, there's enough inventory, or not that there's enough inventory because there's not a lot of stuff for sale, but there's enough that it kind of evens out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know. That seems reasonable. And then we go down to the section about exemptions and credits. Can you talk about the different exemptions and credits that there are?
Oh boy, exemptions. So there is military exemptions. There's disabled military exemptions. There's business property tax credits, homestead tax credits, ag land credits, family farm tax credits.
So if you're just doing any of those, go in and
Yeah,
check
absolutely. Yeah. And so if somebody buys a new property, we'll mail out the forms with our current situation. We started just mailing out forms to everyone so that they didn't have to come to the office if they didn't.
So if a person
to.
has a business at their home, can they do the property tax credit, or they're doing the home exemption?
So depends on if you're doing a business at your home and that space is being valued as commercial space, you could get the business property tax credit, and you could still get the homestead, I believe. But the thing to remember is, if you're not to get that, you're gonna have to pay for some commercial space in your house. That's really the bottom line, which is considered a dual class property. And there is some. There's several actually.
Okay. Let's talk about special assessments real quick,
You bet.
because that came up here at City Hall, and they brought up some good points here. So, and And Aaron, maybe you want to discuss that a little bit, when the city might assess something to taxes.
Yeah, and usually in the spring around March, if we as a city did some sort of work to a property, whether it be for a nuisance abatement or something like that, and the homeowner did not pay it over that last year, we send that to the county auditor, and then that gets put on property taxes coming up for the next year. So one of the things I think what you're referring to is that we need, if you're buying a property in Fairfield or anywhere, you should check with the county auditor and the treasurer to make sure that there aren't any assessed bills to property taxes, so that you can make sure you're not paying for an assessment to your house that should have been taken care of by the previous property owner.
And that, again, doesn't really have anything to do with assessment. However,
It's
it's there with the tax situation.
absolutely, it's special assessment is just applied to a property, whether it's to repatch, patch a sidewalk, if it's to mow a yard, whatever. It gets applied through the auditor's office, the treasurer then sends it out with the tax bill.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Gee whiz, I've gone through all my questions. I thought we would be here for an hour talking about different things. What have we missed?
Well, go ahead, Steve.
Well, just, big things to remember is don't be afraid to call the office. If you have a question, call the office. It's just so much easier to handle things across the counter, and, just be on, it's just nice to be able to handle a problem if there is a problem and shake a hand when you walk away. And, if we're wrong, we're wrong. If we're not, we're not. But we're always happy to take a look at property. Don't be afraid to call the office.
It's not like the sheriff's in there.
No.
He's down the street.
Yeah. That's really it. Just don't be afraid to call the office and be, it's just always nice to be able to talk to people and figure out, if there's a problem to fix it, because we want to be right with people.
By the way, do fences on the property make a difference?
We do not assess on commercial properties, not on residential.
Okay.
Same with paved driveways. We don't pick up paved driveways. That all kind of goes into the neighborhood and what we call land value.
Mm-hmm.
It, typically neighborhoods with paved driveways, most all of them have paved driveways.
Your realtor's probably going to say it's going to help the sale value, though.
Absolutely, but it's taken in with the land value.
Yep.
So it's on its own. It's not really I think there is maybe one county in the state that I know of that measures driveways.
Interesting.
Solar panels. We haven't seen anything that really indicates solar panels help sales at this point. There's some credits and stuff available for that,
Mm-hmm.
but at this point we aren't assessing them, because there's just nothing that really is a clear indicator that they're increasing values.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that either.
So it's a nice benefit for your energy costs and stuff like that.
Absolutely,
So-
but it's just strictly.
But yeah,
a benefit.
it doesn't affect your property taxes, which is actually fantastic if you
Yeah.
want to put
Absolutely.
that in. Yeah.
Yeah, that is great. So there you go, people. Get those solar panels on there, and get some other credits from the state and the federal.
Yeah, there's credits available at homestead. Make sure you have your homestead. If you're living there, you have to be living there. Primary residence. If you're a military veteran, there's an exemption for that. It's not a huge exemption, but it'll help you a little. And if you served, it's worth it. If you're a disabled veteran, 100% disabled, that's a free ride. I mean, you can. And there's a few of them around.
How about some low income?
There is some low income. That is through the treasurer's office. I don't know exactly what that number is. I think it's 23,000 is that threshold. But that'd be through the treasurer's office. Talk to Mark, and he can help you with that.
Okay. So how many people work in your office?
4, typically. We had a lady retire. Her replacement left for Davis County. And so we hired a new one to start the first year. So we're at 3 at the moment, but typically 4.
So you're going to be hiring another person soon?
We have hired some.
Oh, you have hired some. All right. So sorry, I guess there's no jobs out there for there.
I guess I won't polish my resume.
So, hey, Aaron, why don't you talk a little bit just about this tax study? Because he did a little tax study this last week, and it's just kind of interesting. I mean, it's a little bit different flavor than what most of what we're talking about, but it is kind of interesting to let people know about how we rate against some of our communities around us and other cities in
Across
Iowa.
the state, yeah. What I did is I did a tax rate study for a lot of the communities that are very similar to us in size, and our current overall tax levy for the city of Fairfield is $15.67 a thousand. That includes an $8.10 for our general fund, and then there's a debt service levy and some other things, which brings it up to $15.67. The interesting thing is if you go throughout the state with cities from I picked up cities from 7,313, which is Knoxville, all the way up to 12,661, which is Boone. So I did a wide range, which is about 15 cities that were similar size to us. And that $15.67 turns out to be right about smack dab in the middle. Our overall consolidated tax rate, which is the county, the schools, and the cities, and is the hospital in there?
There's a handful of them. But
yeah, our overall consolidated tax rate is $37.60. And of course, that's again per $1,000 of assessed value, which is where the assessor comes in. Again, we're right in the middle, and actually for consolidated tax rate, we're kind of we might be on the more of the lower end. So we're doing pretty well overall. The myth out there that we're overtaxed is, we probably aren't overtaxed. I mean, as a city administrator, I'd actually like to see our overall city levy be down a little bit. But that means we've got to do some negotiating with other entities to try and have everybody pay equally on different shared services. And so we're working on that. But overall, our city levy has gone down over the last, Mike Harmon was before me for 2 years. So overall, for the last 6 years, our tax levy rate has been going in a downward trend, which is what we're working on and trying to do. So hopefully we can continue to do that, and that's overall. And I'd be happy to share this with anybody if they had any questions. Again, give us a call. That's kind of why we're here. We're happy to answer questions if we can and go from there.
And even though that rate it's come down from your side, assessments go up. So, but it's better that it comes down than it goes up and then this goes up.
Correct.
At the same time.
Yep, absolutely. So. And of course, to give Steve credit, he doesn't have a lot of control over what the state says thou shalt assess property values at, stuff like that. So I don't want people to go into him thinking that it's him just choosing, well, I think that house is worth this. Now, it's not Steve's personal opinion. It's what he has to do professionally. So it's not all Steve's fault.
It's pretty strict and pretty laid out how we operate.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all in the Iowa code, and that's just how we have to work.
Yep.
And so give us a rundown here. So, the treasurer collects those property taxes every 6 months, right? And we're getting ready to go into budget time.
Year. Yep.
So just take 2 minutes and give us the snapshot of what the city's process looks like now for the next couple months as we go through budget process. How do you get those numbers?
Well, it actually starts in the assessor's office. The assessments go out, and then it goes to the auditor's office, who then says, okay, this is about how much you're going to bring in new tax dollars. So then we go back to our department heads, and our department heads then go, are looking at their budgets for each year, and then they look at, okay, this is what I spent last year. This is what the city administration says. This is about what we have available. So they go through that and try and figure out how much they have available. A lot of times we'll look at the cost of living increase for salaries, which of course is the largest expense for people's budgets, and then we'll start looking at the other costs of doing business, whether it be vehicle maintenance, street repairs, equipment costs, insurance costs. All of those things go all into those budgets. And then once the department heads kind of come up with numbers, then that comes back to the city administration. And then we, as a city administrative office, starts to look at how things look. If it's reasonable, then we probably say, okay, we're okay with this. We've done a really good job over the last 6 years of building our base to where we're not overspending, and we have cash available to where we're protecting the citizens, because if for some reason the state doesn't give us tax dollars for a 6-month period or a 3-month period, we can cover that and protect ourselves. So once we go back through the budget, then we start sitting down with the council, particularly the Ways and Means Committee, and then we go through the budget again with them. And after they get that approval, then we go to the full council, which the council then, we set a public hearing in February. In February, that public hearing, and then we set the actual budget hearing. Once we have the public hearing, then we set the budget hearing. Most of the time, there's a new law out there, or the new process, where if you go above if there's a 2% growth in your budget, or if there's more than a 2% growth in your budget, you have to set a public hearing and a maximum levy hearing, I think is what it's called, if I remember right. And so you go through that process, and then you can actually approve your budget. So what that law really did, it didn't do anything other than you have to have another public hearing and another meeting. So
It gives the public another opportunity in case, in case they missed it, to participate and comment.
It doesn't mean you can't go above that 2%, because I hear a lot of elected officials talk about 2% allowable growth. That's not accurate. You just have to have another meeting and another hearing to justify why you're going above that 2%. And we actually, over the last couple of years, we've gone over 2%, but it's been because of growth in the police department, growth in our street department, or something like that, to why we've had to increase services. And that's all what we use our tax dollars for, is provide services for the entire community. Now, if people don't want the services, I understand that, but I think most people would like the services that we provide, and would think that we try and do it as economically as possible. So that's kind of where our dollars go, is to provide services for the community.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that quick rundown, so people know what to expect over the next couple months. That's
definitely budgeting in a nutshell right there.
Yes.
That's
Right.
it.
Right. Great. Well, I really appreciate both of you coming in tonight and going over some of these things. Steve, thank you for coming in. I think hopefully that will answer some questions out there that people have. And thanks, Aaron, for coming in also. And we're going to look forward to some more sessions next year. We're going to hopefully be doing the water department, the sewer department, and the planning and zoning after the first of the year, or the first quarter maybe. And so that should be fun. Looking forward to that. So anyway, thanks for tuning in tonight. And if you weren't able to tune in, hopefully you'll be able to tune in later. So thank you from City Hall, and appreciate Jason coming to help us out and make this happen.